Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made the trip in the first show of 2017. This is show number 632, and I'm so glad you're here with us. We took a few days off for the holidays, and I've had a few stories piling up, and so I've got some interesting things to tell you about. First of all, I want to say thanks for taking time to watch Eugene Cannabis TV. It's a labor of love for us to produce this show. It's not only a labor of love for the plant, cannabis, but a labor of love to be able to communicate with others about this incredible plant. And then, of course, we have to have many thanks to the Community Television 29, which makes it possible for us to produce this show. And I want to give a quick plug for CTV. This is the website, ectv.632.2017-01-04. And that's the website of the Community TV, which is a great organization to be a part of. I'm a advisory board member myself. I'm here on Wednesday nights to keep the office open between 4 and 8, and so help people sign up. It's only $10 a year. I mean, that's pretty darn cheap, $10 a year, and you can borrow equipment, take classes, and something to look into, and produce your own show or contribute to ongoing shows. Always looking for more input and more people to come in and join, and so anyway, a good plug for that great group of people. And so a few needs. We need some Mac equipment, especially, of course, a hard drive, a 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte hard drive. We could really use one very badly. And also, we're running on Macs, and so if anybody's got a nice, shiny, powerful Mac out there, wow, we would really be beholden. We've been doing this show. We're the oldest running show on cannabis, on Community Television 29. We're the longest running show, and so I've been at it for a long time and very committed. But we don't have a budget. We just run out of whatever we can scratch up and get what we need, you know, so we could use some help there. Also, a quick shout out, they needed anybody with a plastic cutter, you know, it's like a printer, only instead it cuts plastic where you can make window signs and stuff. Need somebody that has experience with those. I bought one, but I need some help with the software, so anybody can help out with that, give us a help. I could definitely use some help there. That's get a hold of DanK Bagman at hotmail.com, and let us know if you could help out. Also, we have LV Musica's tin over here to my left, and to your right, as they say. And this is the tin that her cigarettes come in. She gets 300 cannabis cigarettes from the United States. She's one of 4 patients left living that get their medical marijuana directly from the government. She's on vacation right now with family in Colombia, so she's having a great time down there. But these tins, she asked for donations. It helps finance her activism work in the cannabis world. She's very, very active and has really hard into it and a big believer of it, so she needs help with that. And so if you or anybody out there can know somebody that would be interested in picking up one of the tins that her cigarettes come in, she usually she's gotten as high as $3,000 actually donation just for the empty tin, but if she could get 1,000, it'd be incredible for us. So I told her I'd put it on the show and talk about it, and hope that somebody could be able to do that for her and come up with one heck of a nice memento from the marijuana scene, so to speak. So anyway, I'm jumping into the stories real quick. We've got first of all, this was on yahoo.com and written by Ross Lincoln, dated January 1st, 2017. New Year's Eve prankster changes the Hollywood sign to Hollyweed. In what feels like an extremely fitting and definitely hilarious stunt of 2017, a presumably pro-marijuana and pro-pun prankster last night somehow managed to sneak onto the mountaintop grounds of Los Angeles' iconic Hollywood sign and alter it to read Hollyweed. Fortunately for Angelenos and for the preservation of historic landmarks, the prank didn't actually damage the sign. The New Year's evil vandal, or if you prefer hero, or just kidding there, covered the sign's 2 letters O with tarps that made them look like lowercase e's. The LAPD has confirmed to other media outlets that the incident was captured by local surveillance cameras and is being investigated as misdemeanor trespassing. Though, to be honest, it probably would have been classified as a high crime. The author writes, sorry. Erected in 1923 and originally reading Hollywood Land, the Hollywood sign that advertised a segregated housing project that was intended to stand on the site for 18 months. It quickly became a signature landmark of the city itself, despite poor upkeep and subsequent heavy deterioration. Originally consisting of 30-foot letters, it was restored and repaired over the years, eventually being replaced in 1978 by the current version consisting of sturdier 45-foot tall letters and combined 350 feet long. California voters approved the full state-level legalization of marijuana in November, a fact presumably celebrated by the vandal. But it's worth noting it isn't the first time the sign has been altered to celebrate the funky green. The first time happened in January 1976 after a marijuana decriminalization bill was passed. For the curious, other notable alterations to the sign include Hollywood for an Easter sunrise service visible from the Hollywood Bowl in April 1977. Go Navy, done with permission by a group of midshipmen for the Army-Navy football game's first and only West Coast edition in December 1983. Raffi-Sod, unauthorized alteration in 1985 by an obscure Baden called the Raffis. Ollywood, done by presumably pro-Olive North vandals in 1987 during the Iran-Contra hearings. And Oil War, done in 1991 by people opposed to the first Gulf War. Later that year, a yellow ribbon was tied around the sign after the war ended. So anyway, that's where we're at on that. The high crimes that changed the sign to Hollyweed. And court ruling here that it's interesting. Landmark State Court ruling says THC in blood is not sufficient grounds for DUI. It's written by Justin Gardner, and it was in the freethoughtproject.com, dated January 1st. Phoenix, Arizona. A court of appeals in Phoenix delivered a ruling on Thursday that could set a precedent for legal systems grapple with the question of driving under the influence of cannabis. Medical marijuana users cannot be convicted of driving while under the influence of the drug absent proof that they were actually impaired, the State Court of Appeals ruled Thursday. In a major setback for prosecutors, the judge pointed out that Arizona, unlike some other states, has no law that spells out that at a certain level of THC in the blood, a person is presumed to be impaired. What that means is every case where prosecutors charge a medical marijuana user with breaking the law requires expert testimony to show that particular individual was impaired at that particular level of THC. This is a huge win for citizens and for rationality itself, as it negates the government's assumption that an arbitrary number means a driver is impaired, which provided grounds for criminal conviction. Nadar Ishak was pulled over in 2013 after his vehicle drifted out of its lane. Instead of invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, he admitted to smoking cannabis that morning when the cop probed him for some sign of criminal behavior. The cop said Ishak had bloodshot eyes and body tremors and eye tremors during a field sobriety test. Ishak was charged with driving while impaired to the slightest degree and driving with marijuana in his body. Jurors convicted him of the second charge, but even though Ishak had a state-issued medical card, the city judge refused to allow him to tell this to the jurors. Presently, the medical cannabis card would have shown the jury that Ishak was legally entitled under the 2010 Arizona Medical Marijuana Act to use the drug and have it in his system. Judge Diane Johnson of the Court of Appeals recognized that Ishak was denied a fair trial and further pointed out that the city judge was wrong to rule that it was up to Ishak to prove he was not impaired. The city prosecutor had actually stated it was irrelevant whether a defendant is actually impaired or not, and suggested the 2010 law means medical cannabis cardholders have to prove through expert testimony that THC in the blood does not cause impairment in people generally or in any person. It appears city judges and prosecutors had set up a nice little trap for medical cannabis patients, but the higher court just demolished it. Nothing in the statute requires a cardholder to present expert testimony or precludes a cardholder from offering non-expert testimony on the question of whether the cardholder was impaired due to THC, wrote Judge Johnson, further supporting this conclusion that the reality that at present there is no presumptive impairment limit established by Arizona law. And according to the evidence here, there is no scientific consensus about the concentration of THC that generally is sufficient to impair a human being. Even though Ishak had a blood THC level of 26.9 nanograms, there was no foundation to prove this causes impairment. Indeed, there is no widely accepted way to test cannabis impairment in drivers, as THC metabolites can show up in the blood long after the person has ingested cannabis. Also, experienced users can be completely unimpaired even if they test above an arbitrary derived blood THC limit. The Oregon Supreme Court already has ruled that the mere presence of metabolites, the chemical compounds caused the breakdown of marijuana in the body, is insufficient by itself to prove impairment. That's because those chemicals can remain in the body for days or weeks afterwards. Despite the best efforts of the local prosecutors to criminalize medical cannabis patients when they drive vehicles, it appears that state courts are having none of it. Thursday's decision is the latest in a string of appellate court rulings that have limited the ability of prosecutors to bring various charges against medical marijuana users. These range from limiting the kind of evidence that prosecutors can use to bring drug driving charges to requirements for law enforcement officers to give back drugs taken after drug users. Here's a novel idea. Cops and prosecutors should stop harassing medical cannabis patients and focus on real criminals. That's something we've been saying for years, so we're still saying it. It's still happening. So I'm going to be putting some stuff together on the DRE, drug recognition expert. I want people have got to be educated on that, because even though cannabis is used, I mean it's legal, they're still going to they're even putting out ads now that they're still looking for an impairment, and they are looking for impairment. So you've got to be protected and know what you're doing, and I'll be discussing all that in a later show. So right now we're going to take a break, and I want you to come right back because I got some more stories to tell you and some more information. And so I'll be here, and I hope you will be too. So we'll see you then.
And now a message from the American Marijuana Growers Association.
Hi, I'm a farmer, and I work hard every day to grow high-quality marijuana, the biggest cash crop in these United States. I'd like to thank you for your support of U.S. marijuana policy. Because marijuana is illegal, I don't have to pay taxes. Even better, prohibition leads to artificially inflated prices, which means a better quality of life for me and my family, as long as I don't get caught. Just as importantly, your tax dollars support thousands of U.S. agents who work tirelessly to keep low-grade, foreign marijuana out of our country. So thank you, America. And remember, whether you're nauseated from chemotherapy or just in the mood for a nice cool buzz, choose the best pot in the world, American Homegrown.
Welcome back to the second half of the Eugene Cannabis TV, episode number 632. You got DanK here. I think I forgot to introduce myself the first half, but anyway, you got DanK here, your host. And the first half, the last story I was reading was a landmark court state ruling says it's saying that THC in the blood is not sufficient grounds for DUI. Well, this is an interesting story right behind that that's dated 12/30/2016. It was in Willamette Weekly and written by Tara Martin, titled "Study: Fatal Car Crashes Declined After Oregon Legalized Cannabis." The Columbia University Public Health State cautiously credits legal weed. The Portland Police Bureau and other law enforcement agencies are pledging to step up DUI patrols on New Year's Eve to catch intoxicated drivers. But a new national study says the Oregon's roads are getting less drunk and dangerous, and it cautiously credits legal weed. The frequency of traffic fatalities in Oregon has dropped significantly since the state legalized medical marijuana, according to a new study from the Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health. The researchers analyzed car crash data from 1985 to 2014 for the U.S. states that have enacted medical marijuana laws. For 7 of these states, including Oregon, the main effect model showed that legalizing weed was significantly associated with a reduction of traffic fatality rates, primarily among people aged 25 to 44. The Columbia University study says the rate of traffic fatalities per 100,000 people in Oregon was 20.6 in 1985 and only 8.5 in 2014. Oregon voters approved medical marijuana in 1998. The Washington Post first reported on the study last week, but did not single out the Oregon findings. The effect of marijuana legalization on traffic crashes is one of the most significant questions surrounding the end of cannabis prohibition. Many had thought that legal access to marijuana would increase the number of fatal traffic accidents, as it would lead to more impaired drivers on the road. This study tells the opposite story, but says the results aren't simple. We are uncertain what the causal chain may be, the researchers admit. A theory called the substitution hypothesis proposes that people in states like Oregon are swapping out alcohol use for marijuana use, which would track with the overall decrease in alcohol-related traffic fatalities. But why people are less likely to drive high than drunk, or at least get into serious accidents while doing so, is something the Columbia researchers say requires further study. Examining the role of operational dispensaries, the study concludes, would provide additional information on whether increases in marijuana availability via dispensaries lead to changes in fatality rates. So we'll be hearing more about that in future times, but I have heard that over and over again, that the states that have legalized both medical and recreational, the fatality rates are going down. Teen usage is actually going down. They always said it would go up, but it's actually going down. So it's interesting how this turns out. Now, this is something from a good friend of mine and a colleague, might I say colleague, is a cannabis freedom activist, I guess. John is he is the main person behind the Oregon medical marijuana law, the bill that was written in the first place. It started the medical marijuana program. It was enacted in 1998. John always speaks well and is very knowledgeable on what's going on. So the medical marijuana program right now is in trouble, and this is what this is all about. Excuse me. He titles this RIP, rest in peace. Early sales means RIP, rest in peace, OMMP, the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. He's saying Happy New Year and how to save our baby. The problem, he says. Early sales ends starting on New Year's Day. Oregon medical marijuana dispensaries will no longer be allowed to sell marijuana to people who are not registered patients. This sparks a series of disastrous effects on patients, the medical growers who take care of them, adult consumers and retail stores that go out of business, and on tax revenue for the state of Oregon. Many patients will lose their safe, affordable access to medical marijuana because the growers who supply them with free or low-cost marijuana products will be driven out of business. The growers will be folding because they will no longer be able to sell to most of the marijuana stores in Oregon. Most of the marijuana stores in Oregon are currently medical marijuana dispensaries, which can sell all adults under the early sales program created by the legislature. When early sales ends at midnight on December 31st, most stores will switch to being regulated by the OLCC, which will allow them to sell to all adults, not just patients. But the 37,847 medical growers are not allowed to sell to OLCC stores. Only the 357 OLCC licensed producers are allowed to sell to OLCC stores, changing the supply of legal marijuana in Oregon from 37,847 small farms to 357 big farms overnight will be a disaster. There are currently 327 medical marijuana dispensaries. Tomorrow, January 1, these stores are supposed to be replaced by 188 OLCC retail stores. The numbers show that the OLCC is way behind in licensing stores switching over from OHA regulations. This will, of course, cut sales starting tomorrow. Thousands of consumers will be inconvenienced. Some stores will lose enough revenue in sales to go bankrupt. The state of Oregon will potentially lose millions of dollars in revenue simply because the OHA licensed dispensaries will suddenly be unable to sell to healthy people. The January 1st deadline to end the early sales program will be a disaster that must be stopped as quickly as possible. This program has been working beyond all expectations, raising nearly $50 million in tax revenue and helping compassionate growers help qualified patients. There is no good reason not to extend early sales. Solution: extend early sales. Legislation to do this would be extremely simple. This would be the first bill passed by the 2017 legislature, allowing OHA registered dispensaries to compete with and compliant OLCC stores is a win-win. Maintaining a 25% tax at dispensaries while having a 17% tax at OLCC stores excuse me, gives incentives to shift to OLC regulation over time, as that is the legislature's goal. Continuing to exempt qualified patients from the sales tax is critical. What can people do? Share this post. Tell the Oregon Legislature's Marijuana Legalization Committee to expand early sales. Contact your own state legislatures as well. Contact the governor and ask her to please work with the legislature to make simple changes to extend early sales. So, again, send me an email at dankbagman@hotmail.com if you need some more information on this. And also stay tuned, because as things develop in Salem, I'll be talking about it, and hopefully we'll be having rallies. I've been to many rallies in Salem and a lot of demonstrations. The hearings that we've gone to, personally, I don't think they're all really that helpful, but we still have to go through the motions. Unfortunately, that's what the legislature does. They go through the motions. They just sit there like a lump of coal. Well, we talk about what's wrong with the program and what needs to be fixed and why, and they just sit there. Their minds are already made up. Their minds are already made up. The hearing is just a formality. They don't tell you that, but that's the reality of it. So it's a real mess, and the big players are already working out what's going to happen. We've got big businesses up there, and they got of course, see, the thing about the legislature is that big business and law enforcement are just two of the main factors that have the ears of the legislature. So when poor little old patient me, or little patient advocate me, or legalization advocate me, anyway, they don't even hardly know I exist. So we got to hit them with numbers, and that's why rallies are very important. We got to show up in numbers. But another quick thing is, and this one I have to go through, it's going to be tight, but this is really interesting. Mysterious illness tied to marijuana use on the rise in states with legal weed. This was at the ectv.632.2017-01-04 website, and it's December 28th last year by Jonathan LaPook. For more than 2 years, Lance Crowder was having severe abdominal pain and vomiting, and no local doctor could figure out why. Finally, an emergency room physician in Indianapolis had an idea. The first question asked was if I was taking hot showers to find relief. When he asked me that question, I basically fell into tears because I know he had an answer, Crowder said. The answer was cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, or CHS. It's caused by heavy, long-term use of various forms of marijuana. For unclear reasons, the nausea and vomiting are relieved by hot showers or baths. They'll often present to the emergency department 3, 4, 5 different times before we can sort this out, said Dr. Keenan Hurd, an emergency room physician in Aurora, Colorado. He co-authored a study showing that since 2009, when medical marijuana became widely available, emergency room visits diagnosed for CHS in 2 Colorado hospitals nearly doubled. In 2012, the state legalized recreational marijuana. It is certainly something that, before legalization, we almost never saw, Hurd said. Now we're seeing it quite frequently. So CHS, it's something to be, I'd never heard of it, so, but it's definitely out there, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that. And so listen to it, listen out, we'll be talking about it on the prior shows. In Empire Hempfest, we're getting geared up, and we're wanting to do something in 2017, so stay tuned, and thanks for being here, and I hope to see you guys in the shows. I mean, next time, be here. See you. Thanks. Bye.